The garage door was wide open, and as soon as I saw it, my heart sank. My late husband's car was gone. I stood there, in the stillness of the early morning, staring at the empty spot where it had sat for the last 20 years. My hands were trembling around the mug of coffee I hadn't even noticed had gone cold. The car, a vintage 1965 Mustang that had been his pride and joy, was more than just a vehicle. It was a symbol of our life together. All those weekends spent working on it, restoring every piece with care, as if each turn of the wrench was an act of love. It wasn't just a car, it was part of the foundation of our marriage. But now it was gone. I stood frozen, barely noticing the birds singing outside or the soft breeze of early spring brushing against my face. I had known it had to happen eventually, but it didn't make it any easier. My son, James, and his wife, Lisa, had been talking about money problems for months, but I never imagined it would come to this. Selling Dennis's car without even asking me, I felt my chest tighten, my breath catching. That car was all Dennis had left me. Besides memories, I didn't even know where to start. The garage was silent, save for the creaking of the door as it swayed in the breeze. The workbench, cluttered with tools Dennis had spent years collecting, stood untouched. His toolbox, red with age, sat just where it had always been, a faint outline in black marker showing where everything belonged. I could still see the worn edges of his journal, left open on the bench. He had written in it often, recording every project, every repair, every hour spent bringing this car back to life. The last entry I'd seen, just a few months before his death, read, "If I can teach Sarah to drive this thing before we retire, I'll call it a win." The words still haunted me. Our road trip, the one we'd planned for years, was something he'd been looking forward to. But he was gone now, and I was left with a sense of emptiness that no amount of time could fill. "Mum, we need to talk." James's voice broke through my thoughts, pulling me from my daze. I turned to see him standing at the edge of the driveway, his posture stiff, eyes avoiding mine. His wife Lisa was right behind him, a look of indifference on her face. "Where's the car, Mom?" James asked, his voice filled with hesitation. That was when I knew. "Where is it, James?" He shifted his weight, swallowing hard. "I sold it." "For a trip?" "Lisa's business. She needed it." I stared at him, feeling the walls close in. "You sold it?" The words felt foreign, coming from my own mouth, but they were all I could say. The shock of his confession lingered in the air as I tried to process what he had just said. But what I didn't expect was the phone call that would change everything. I couldn't bring myself to speak. My mind was still trying to catch up with the words that had just left James's mouth. He sold it, for a trip. My hands were shaking again, this time in anger and disbelief. How could he? How could he take something that meant so much to both of us, and sell it without even consulting me? I had to stop myself from raising my voice. Years of nursing had taught me how to control my emotions, how to keep calm in even the most stressful situations. But this was beyond anything I could have prepared for. James shifted uncomfortably, glancing over at Lisa, who stood by the car, arms folded, an expression of complete detachment on her face. It was the same look she always wore, cool, distant and calculating. I had never been able to get close to her, but I'd always hoped that James had found someone who truly cared for him. Now I wasn't so sure. "Mum, it's not like I didn't think about it," he said, his voice defensive. "But Lisa has been working so hard to build her business, and this trip, it's important. I didn't think it'd be such a big deal." His words hung in the air, but none of them made sense. The Mustang, the one Dennis had poured his soul into, wasn't just a car to me. It was a piece of him. How could he not see that? I took a slow, deep breath. "You didn't think it'd be a big deal?" "That was your father's car, James. It's the one thing he left behind for me. And now you've sold it for a trip?" His shoulders slumped, and for a brief moment I saw the guilt flicker in his eyes. But then he quickly masked it with a shrug. It was just sitting there, Mum. It's not like you ever drive it. It wasn't doing anything. I could feel my chest tightening with frustration. It wasn't just sitting there, James. That car was part of your father. We were going to drive it together when we retired. We were going to see the world, just the two of us. The words hit harder than I expected. I hadn't even realized how much I had been holding on to that dream. That vision of us driving across the country, exploring the places Dennis had always talked about. Now it was all gone. Mum, I didn't know what else to do, James said, his voice breaking. It's just... Money was tight, and Lisa's been under so much pressure. We needed the funds, and this seemed like the easiest solution. I couldn't speak anymore. There was too much to say, too much to process, and my emotions had run out of words. But as I turned away from James, trying to find a way to keep myself together, my phone rang. I looked at the screen, surprised to see an unknown number flashing back at me. For a moment I almost didn't answer. I had no energy left to deal with anything else today, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" I said, my voice weak. "Mrs. Bennet?" The voice on the other end was gruff, like it had been crying. "This is Tom Graves from Graves Classic Auto. I have your husband's car." I froze. My heart stopped for a beat, and I had to sit down. His car? The Mustang? How? I didn't know what to say, but the man on the other end wasn't finished yet. He continued speaking, and the more he told me, the less I understood. But one thing became clear. Dennis had left behind a secret. And the truth was more than I was prepared for, Mrs. Bennet. The voice on the other end of the line cracked with emotion, snapping me back to reality. "This is Tom Graves from Graves Classic Auto. I have your husband's car." I sat there for a moment, trying to make sense of the words. Graves Classic Auto? That was a name I hadn't heard in years. Tom Graves was someone Dennis had mentioned once or twice, a man he'd helped out years ago when he was starting his business. But what was his connection to the Mustang? And why was he calling me now? "Your son brought it in Wednesday," Tom continued, his voice shaky. "I need you to come down here right away. There's something about your husband's car that I think you need to know. Something Dennis wanted you to know." A chill ran down my spine. Dennis? The man who had spent every waking hour of his life rebuilding that car. What could he possibly have wanted me to know? And why had he kept it a secret from me all this time? My mind raced, but I had to force myself to stay calm. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said before hanging up. I grabbed my keys, my hands still trembling. What was going on? And why hadn't James said anything about the car going to a dealership? I knew he'd sold it, that much was clear, but why did Tom Graves have it? And what could he possibly know that was so important? The drive across town felt endless. The streets were quieter than usual, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. I passed the hospital where I had worked for 40 years, the building that had seen so many of my best, and worst, moments. It all seemed like another life now. The world felt strangely distant as I headed towards the industrial district. Finally, I pulled up to Graves Classic Auto. The building was nondescript, the kind of place you'd never think twice about driving past. But the cars in the lot, vintage beauties gleaming under the fluorescent lights, made me stop in my tracks. A man stood by the entrance waiting for me. His hair was greying and his eyes were red, like he had been crying. The moment he saw me, he stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Mrs. Bennet," he said, his voice still rough. "Thank you for coming." "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What's going on? Why is my husband's car here?" Tom wiped his eyes, his hand shaking slightly as he gestured for me to follow him inside. "Dennis saved my life. I owe him everything. And now it's my turn to return the favour." I followed him into the garage, where 3 classic cars sat under protective covers. But my gaze immediately locked onto the last one. There it was. Dennis's Mustang. The car gleamed under the bright lights, the burgundy paint so perfect, so polished, it could have been brand new. I felt my breath catch in my throat as I stepped closer. Tom turned to me, his face pale. When I saw it, I knew something was wrong. Your son didn't know what he had. This car is worth far more than he sold it for. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Worth more? What could be worth more than the years Dennis had spent restoring it? Your husband, Tom continued, his voice shaky again. He talked about this car all the time. He loved it, but he loved you even more. He asked me to make sure you knew the truth if anything ever happened to him. He reached for the car's dashboard and pushed a button hidden behind the radio, revealing a secret compartment. Dennis had me help him install this 2 years ago. He wanted to make sure you had all the information you needed in case something like this ever happened. I watched, my heart pounding, as Tom slowly pulled out a manila folder from the compartment. Inside were documents, photos, and a letter. I'm sorry, Tom said softly, but I think it's time you see what your husband left behind. As I opened the letter, the weight of Dennis's words hit me. But the words inside weren't just a love letter or a goodbye, they were a warning. And the truth about my son's wife was darker than I ever imagined. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter, the familiar handwriting of Dennis flowing across the page. But this time, it wasn't about the Mustang or the road trip we'd planned together. No, this letter was a warning, a final act of love, a message from the grave. Carol, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. I never wanted you to have to deal with this alone, but I couldn't risk you finding out before I had the proof. Vanessa is not who she says she is. Her real name is Vanessa Cortland, but she's used at least 2 other names that I know of. I've been tracking her for 18 months now, ever since I suspected she was using you and James to get to our assets. I've gathered everything I could. Photos, documents, even testimonies from men she's conned in the past. I've kept it all hidden just in case. And now, with the car gone, I need you to finish what I started. She's going to try to take everything from us, Carol. She'll convince James that you're declining, that you need care, and then she'll manipulate him into selling the house. Please don't let her do this to you. The key in this box is for the safe deposit box at First National. You'll find stock certificates there, more than we ever saved. You don't have to worry about money. You're taken care of. Trust Tom Graves. He'll help you. I sat there, my mind reeling, the weight of Dennis's words sinking in. I had always suspected something wasn't right about Vanessa, but this was a nightmare. The woman who had wormed her way into my son's life, who had been so perfect, so charming, was a fraud. And I had missed it. I looked at Tom, my throat tight with emotion. I never knew. I never even suspected. All these months I thought she was just a little too perfect. But this is unbelievable. Tom nodded, his expression grim. Dennis was a good man. He wouldn't have let this happen if he could have stopped it. But now you have to protect your son, Carol. He doesn't know what he's involved in. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. James will never believe me. He's so blinded by her. How do I even begin to show him the truth? Tom placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice firm. He will eventually, but he has to see it for himself. You can't tell him directly. You've got to let him make the discovery on his own. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the documents Dennis had left behind. There were photos of Vanessa at weddings with different men, marriage certificates with names I didn't recognise, and newspaper clippings about elderly frauds. It all made sense now, the way she had moved into James's life. The way she always seemed to be controlling him. The way she had pushed him to sell his father's car. The next morning, I called James. My voice was steady, but inside my heart was racing. James, we need to talk. Just you and me. Can you come by later? His voice sounded strained, but he agreed. I knew this wouldn't be easy, But it was time for him to see the truth. Time to make him understand what Vanessa was capable of. When he arrived, I sat him down at the kitchen table, the same place where we'd shared countless meals over the years. I didn't say anything at first. I just slid the documents across the table toward him. His eyes flicked to the pictures, to the names. I watched his face go pale as he took in the evidence. This isn't real," he whispered, his voice shaking. "This can't be true. You're just trying to protect me from her." "James," I said, my voice breaking, "your father spent the last months of his life trying to protect you. He didn't want to break your heart, but he knew. And now, I need you to see the truth." His hands were trembling as he picked up the phone numbers Dennis had written down. He looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You want me to call them?" "These people," I nodded. "Yes, call them. Ask them what happened. Ask them about her." The silence stretched between us, heavy and thick. And then he did it. He picked up the phone. I could hear his voice on the other end, his questions becoming more frantic as he spoke to the men who had been victims of Vanessa's scam. He hung up the phone, his face ashen. "Mom, she's done this before." "To other people?" "To their families. I know," I said softly. "I know." It wasn't easy, but over the next few days James started to unravel the truth. And with each revelation, I could see the walls around his heart starting to crack. He wasn't just angry at her anymore. He was angry at himself for not seeing it sooner. And slowly he began to heal. But the real change came when he returned to me a week later and asked if he could stay. "I need time, Mom," he said. "I need to figure out how I let this happen." I didn't ask him any questions. I didn't push him. I just made him dinner and let him stay in his old room. The healing was slow, but it was happening, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. A few weeks later, Tom Graves showed up again, pulling into the driveway with Dennis's car gleaming behind him. My heart fluttered as I saw it. The Mustang, the one Dennis had built with his own hands, the one I had thought I'd lost forever. Tom smiled as he got out of the car, holding out the keys. "It belongs with you, Mrs. Bennet. It always has." James and I stood together in the driveway, silent for a moment before he finally spoke. "I can't believe it's back." I smiled, my eyes filling with tears. "Neither can I. Would you have been able to forgive your child for selling something so precious? Or would you have taken a stand like I did? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you've ever dealt with betrayal, family secrets, or a life-changing moment that shifted everything, share your story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional, real-life stories. And remember, no matter how tough things get, there's always a way to rise above it. Stay strong.